Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Module 3 of the Lab Scenario Training Program for updating for the National Registry Portfolio. This one is actually one where we are going to talk about documenting scenarios in Platinum Planner. And with this particular video, we're going to delve into, as much as I can, the actual process of documenting. But before we start, I'd like to go back and refresh kind of what we've talked about in videos 1 and 2. In videos 1 and 2, we refreshed on the skills paperwork and on what actually had to be covered. We also talked about the lab competency worksheets and the new lab competency worksheets, which incorporate the scenarios for the students that are required to have this component as far as documentation is concerned. Now, in either the first video or the second video, when I was showing that document, I mentioned that I wasn't sure about the numbers, and I apologize for that. I had no question in my mind until I started those videos, and I just really don't want to go back and redo them. So bear with me. But the numbers on the requirements for how many are minimum required for adult, geriatric, and pediatric team leads and the team members are correct for P1 and P2. If you add both of them up, they all come up to 20, which is the minimum required, which is scattered across the topics that are required. So those are correct. That means that you have quite a few team member roles that are required as well, because I think that totals up to 10, I believe, that they want in team member. Let's talk about that for a second before we move on to documentation. The reasoning behind that is because the focus now, more so than ever, is on actually 3 different areas. Not one of them, of course, being for the paramedic to be able to team lead and run a call. That's important. But the other 2 focus points are also important, and they involve the entire team or crew, whether they're the partner who will get in the front and drive, whether that other crew member is a paramedic or there are EMTs involved or first responders involved. It's called a focus of an atmosphere of safety, where everyone is keeping their eyes on everything at all times to ensure safety for the patient, the bystanders, the crew, the equipment, etc., and that they're able to speak up in a professional and diplomatic way when they feel like safety is in jeopardy in any way. And the other is crew resource management, for the entire crew to be working together in the best interests of the patient. And that means that in a team member role, whether it's a team member who's also a paramedic, or the team member who is an EMT, or the team member who is an EMT in paramedic school, that they also learn how to watch and speak up if they feel like the team leader has missed something, or if they feel like the team member is straying off the path of the protocols, or that something has happened that the team leader maybe didn't see or doesn't know about, and being able to handle that in a professional and diplomatic manner. Or that there's a problem that's developing that could impair the patient's or bystanders or equipment safety, that they can talk about that in front of a patient in a professional and diplomatic manner. So there's something to be said for the team member role. Also, that creates some problems when you're doing one-on-ones, and I realize that. But that may mean that in a one-on-one situation, you may have to coach the helper to doing this. You may also have to become the team leader for a few scenarios and allow the paramedic student that you've got in the one-on-one to be team member. And in that team leader role, not only watching them for the ability to follow instructions and manage the call from the team member aspect as well, but to watch for safety issues, to watch for where maybe the paramedic is not seeing something, or maybe deviating a little that could impair patient safety or protocols, and that the team member is now able to speak up and communicate as a member of the crew in a professional and diplomatic manner. It also means you may coach the other helper in some of the roles where your paramedic student is the team leader, and have them over the side where they're going to throw something out that the paramedic student as team leader doesn't know is going to happen, maybe handling it inappropriately, being a little more assertive, or, something to the effect where in front of the patient, things are not being handled, so that the team leader has to be put in a role of guiding that situation and correcting it in a professional manner, knowing that the patient or the patient's family is watching, or handling it professionally even after the call. So all of this should be incorporated into the teaching environment in these scenarios. And I'm sure some of you have already been doing that, or maybe all of you have, but maybe it's a mindset thinking because we're been so focused on getting them to be able to run the calls. We do need to get them focused into those issues, those other two issues of safety and crew resource management as well. So that having been said, we did talk about how to run the scenarios. And the interesting thing is when we get into groups where we have multiple students, that makes it real fun and helpful for you, because if multiple students are also all needing the scenario project, and when we go into this documenting phase, that's why we supplied you with extra tablet PCs, because you can have one or two of the other students or three of the other students who are not in the scenario, however many you have, with the tablets, and you can set up these scenario documentations before each scenario starts and mark them into the scenario. And then that way you can have them mark themselves as peer reviewers, and they can fill out the paperwork on some of the scenarios. They can actually do it. What I recommend is you set it up and mark it, but then run the scenario, and they're making their notes over to the side on a notepad, on the ringed skills check sheets that we're going to, that you should have with dry erase markers, whatever you've got there for them to make their marks on. And then at the end of the scenario, if you don't have to stop it because there's been a problem that has developed, at the end of the scenario, you can have them discuss it. And if the student still passed, but there were some issues you have to mark from 2 to 1s, you can discuss and tell them exactly how to fill out those scenario evaluations on their own and have them fill it out and then mark the student successful. Or if you want to have them fill it out, mark the student unsuccessful, which means they have to repeat a scenario over the same topic, same age group, or even repeat that same scenario, that's great too. But you have to make sure that all the minimum documentations are made. And this is one way that you can do that when you have groups with multiples. If you have groups with multiples, that's fine, but even so, you as the instructor are going to have to ensure that you evaluate each of these students on the minimum numbers that you need to evaluate them on for each level. So it can't just be all peer evaluation, all right? One nice thing is that if you have the skill sheets all laminated and available in the labs, and you can hand out skill sheets to some of the extras, and they can make notes, we're also suggesting, and Abilene will provide you with a red card and a yellow card, or several red cards and yellow cards. That way your candidates or your students who are not involved in the scenario, who are watching for the skills to be done appropriately and are watching so that they can fill out the peer review scenarios on these candidates for each of these scenarios at the end of each one, they can have a yellow card and a red card in hand. If they see something happening in the scenario that is a deviation, but it would not cause harm to the patient, they can throw out yellow cards. You note those, they make notes, so those can be discussed at the end of the scenario. If one of the peers or you see something that is a big deviation or could cause harm to the patient, then they throw out the red cards. You stop the scenario and see what the problem is. What is it that was seen, or what is it that needs to be discussed? You, as the instructor, need to evaluate that then to determine if it's truly a red card, because a red card means if it's truly something like that, you should stop the scenario, discuss it, and start the scenario from the top again to guide them past that so that they don't make that same mistake twice. Do something differently next time. You also have to kind of guide it in that sometimes the peers will start to pick on each other. Well, you know, this one picked on me and last one, so I'm going to look for things this time. So you may stop it, they start to discuss and go, yeah, I understand what you're saying and it probably shouldn't be done, but that's not something that is a big enough issue here where we're going to stop the scenario and start over. Okay, here's where we are. Now let's pick up the scenario where we left off and continue keeping that in mind. So you can guide that. But this is a good tool because we don't want them getting to the bottom of the scenarios with major mistakes and then you discuss them, because it doesn't reinforce the fact that they need to correct those mistakes, correct those errors that may cause patient harm or be a big safety issue. And in those cases, start the scenario over. And then that way the student can implement what they've learned and not make that mistake again. Okay? So that's part of documenting in the Platinum. So now, and then running the scenarios, I guess. What I want to do is I'm going to incorporate the Platinum training video here, because when I tried to set up our own system here to show you how to document, I had to put myself in as a student and it's skewing all the reports. So I'm going to play bits and pieces of this Platinum YouTube that is actually on the site that you can view later. Once you get into the Manage Scenarios area, you can click on it and watch it yourself. But I'm going to pick up where it actually involves your documentation piece. For now, I'm going to be setting up the labs in advance for you, where in the upcoming tabs, all the scenarios will be made available for P1 if it's a P1 session, P2, but you have to look because there may be a conglomeration there. And the way I've coded these is I'm putting them in there is all the P1s will be seen with the names of the scenarios, and I did not put them in this time as P1 at the beginning. In the future I may, but the P2 scenarios start with P2 and then the number and the name of the scenario. So that's how you can delineate and make it a little easier, because they're usually going to be grouped together. So we're going to start this video under the premise that you as the lab instructor have prepared, you've made sure that your students are in that are supposed to be in the session, and that they have applied for the lab scenarios and been accepted, and that I've noted it on the Google Calendar. So this would be picking up with you having logged in as an instructor, and this is what you will see. So we're going to try this and see that it plays, and I'll take it to a big screen here for you.
And see your newly created scenario in the list. If you are ready to add students to your scenario, click the Add Students link next to the scenario. To add students, choose your class from the drop-down, and then select your students from the list on the left. Click the arrow to add your students to the right area. Click the Add Students to Opportunity button to save your students to the scenario. You will see an alert telling you that your students have been added to the scenario. Click OK. To view the students you have added to the scenario, click Details next to your scenario in the list on the Teacher Managed Scenarios page. Students will show next to the Students heading on the Details page. Manage Student Scenario Documentation is where you as a teacher will go to enter your student scenario documentation.
Okay, now let's talk about that briefly. This means you've logged in as an instructor, you've gone to Scenarios and clicked on Manage Scenarios, and then in the upcoming list will be the whole list of scenarios that you should have to choose from for your sessions. Adding the students, this is where for each scenario, you're going to pick which scenario you're going to do next. You're going to click on it, and you're going to add the students from your group. By adding all the students from your group, and I'm thinking you can do this the night before or before everybody gets there for all the scenarios you plan to cover that day. Remember, these are divided between sessions, so you don't want to go in and just add all the scenarios in. You need to plan these sessions. You need to plan, okay, we need to wipe out, we're on the end of this day and we have this many scenarios we have to do, so that means I need to do half, for instance, so that the next group can come in and finish them. Then I'm going to pick these out. Or pick out so many of them, and if you have enough time to do more, then quickly inside the skills day, you can go in and click to select a couple of more so you can finish them out. Don't leave early. Wipe out as many as you can. But if you pick them all, then it's going to confuse the issue when they go to the next session, because they're already going to be allocated to your session. So you go in ahead of time, pick out the first few scenarios that you're going to be doing. If you're on days 1 and 2, or if you're on days 3 and 4, you need to try to make sure that you're down to the bottom of the list if you can, or at least pick out most of them. Until you get used to this, you may wait until you get to the session and just pick out 2 or 3, and then pick out a couple of more and a couple of more until you get to the end of the day. I don't know how this is going to work yet. I'm leaving this up to you to figure it out. But you go there and you click on each scenario and add the students from your group. Add all the students from your group that are in the scenario class. While we have mixed students, that means that some of them are not going to be added here, and they will not be able to be peer reviewers during that time. But if you only have one student, because it's a one-on-one, you'd just be adding one student to all scenarios for that day. All right? For however many. If it's days 1 and 2, for half. It's days 3 and 2, you're going to check to see how many they did in the last one on their worksheet. And so that means you may have to wait till they get there and do, add in all the other half, or do them one at a time until you get them all done. Again, I'm leaving this up to you. I haven't done this yet. So you're going to have to make this work and see how it works over the first few sessions, and work with the other instructors. You may even ask the student, are you already scheduled for days 3 and 4? Or for P2 students for days 5 and 6, where are you going? This may require some coordination between sites until we get used to doing this, guys. I'm sorry, there's no other way around it. I don't mean to sound confusing. I just need you to help me figure out how to make it work. So if you only have one student, you'd be adding one student. If you have 2 students, you'd be adding 2 students, because then, sometimes one is team leader, sometimes is team member. If you have 3, 4, or 5 students who are in the scenario class, you would add them all, because then you'll be delegating one as team leader, and then doing a skill sheet on another one as team member, and you may have yourself doing the one for team leader, and you may have your third student being your one who's evaluating the team member. You can divide it up, because remember, you have to have team leader sheets and team member sheets. So if you have 3 students, you can have 2 in the scenario, and then you're going to be doing the skill sheet on the team leader, and they're going to be doing the other third person is going to be doing the sheet as team member, not being there's a third wheel in the scenario. So, but they have to be added here for them to even be able to be a peer reviewer. So that's where you're going to check to see. I will have it set up with the classes, so all you'll have to do is go in and add the students, and it'll show you here in a minute how to add the students inside the documentation window. All right, but let me hit play and let's see where we go from here.
Under Scenarios, you can select Manage Scenario Documentation from the drop-down. Click the View link in the Actions column next to the student documentation you would like to view. You can print this information if you need to by clicking the Print button. Click the document link in the Actions column to begin your evaluation on the student scenario documentation. If you see a yellow warning section at the top of this page, this will show the required lab skills that the student has not yet completed.
And that particular item does not count for us, since we don't do the skills entry until they do their check sheets on the testing day. So there's no way I can bypass that item there. Don't worry about that warning at the top.
The skill and grading type drop-downs will change the form based on what you select in the drop-downs.
You notice there it had formative and summative. For the purposes of what we're doing here, we're going to be clicking summative for everything, even though you're not testing yet. The reason for that is, in their system, the formative scenarios do not feed into the final report. The formative scenarios go into an archive. And they have that set up for schools that, so that you can do scenario after scenario after scenario after scenario, which we do. I'm just not requiring that you do the documentation on all those little scenarios that you're doing to just teach or to incorporate, the skills into one thing. So when we're actually doing our scenarios here, the formative and, the practice scenarios and then the testing scenarios, each time I want you to go ahead and click summative so it feeds into the final report.
The forms used here are required by the National Registry. Formatted grading types for scenarios will not be used in reporting and are saved in the system for reference only. Successful summative grading types for scenarios will show in reporting and counted towards National Registry requirements. You must click the checkbox to indicate that a student was successful during the scenario.
If I'm not mistaken, this now is at the bottom and it's a button. Rather than checking it at first, because you still have to do the evaluation, they actually make you do the evaluation first, and they move this one to the bottom with a little button. And so even if it's a peer review, they fill out the sheet, you have to check if the student was successful for it to feed into the report as a successful item. And the peer would also have to click that. If they're unsuccessful, that's fine. You can click unsuccessful and it's going to not count toward the number and they have to repeat it. That's fine. But if you just want to worry about evaluation or paperwork for the successful ones for now, until we get used to doing this, then don't worry about it unless it's a successful one, and then have them fill out the sheet real quickly before you move on to the new scenario and click successful. As we get more accustomed to doing this, and as National Registry changes more and more of their requirements, we may have to do a sheet on every unsuccessful one and successful one, but you may not want to do that for now. Or you may want to, just so that you can get in the habit of practicing and pulling it in. I'm just trying to get you not just to have too much busy work, but at the same time to be getting so adept at using this documentation that it's not wasting so much of your time, which is what I worry about.
The Forms tab will contain the form you selected to fill out for your student. Go through each part of the form carefully and fill out the information regarding the scenario that your student performed. The Documents tab contains
Now, they've changed all that form to 0, 1, 2 type checkboxes, I guess. And this video appears to be older. So you have to go through and do it as checkboxes. That's where I'm asking them to give us the ability to default it all to 2. And then that way you can check 1 or 0 and type in the comments in the comments box of whatever they did wrong. Because for your testing, when you're doing that, I do absolutely want you to do it even if they're unsuccessful and they have to retest. So when you're in the testing session and you're doing your testing scenarios with them as team leaders and you watching them, I definitely want you to do successful and unsuccessfuls in the system. And so that form has changed a bit, and hopefully they will make it where we can default to 2s to save you time. I basically told them that they're going to find schools complaining and instructors complaining because the form is long, and if you have to click on every single item, it takes several minutes, and that takes away from valuable lab time. So my suggestion was that some schools don't seem to trust their instructors. My suggestion was that they give us the toggle switch ability to turn that feature on or off. And if they do that, I will let you know, but I'm trying my best to get them to simplify that for you. Now, the Documents tab is underneath on that same page, and that's where she's talking about now.
Any documents that were previously attached to the scenario. To review the attachment, click Download to download the document to your computer.
This part is not absolutely necessary for you because this is where I have uploaded the actual scenarios. So if you forget the book, this is where you can get a copy of the scenarios, or you can get them from our resource page, which is probably easier. But they're all here as well inside the system.
If you would like to upload any documentation, click the blue area or drag and drop your file into the blue area to upload.
And that's not necessary for you because I don't have anything there that you would need to upload there.
Click the Save Changes button if you would like to come back and make changes to this documentation later. When you save changes, this student documentation will appear in your Documenting tab on the Manage Student Documentation page. If you click the Finalize button, you will go to the Student Categories page. Here you will enable or
The Student Categories page is not necessary for you because since we don't let our students go to rotations until after they have completed testing, you'll just go straight to Finalize. This is for programs where they allow them to pull certain rotations after they've tested certain components. You know, they do practice, then they do testing on that section, and then allow them to go on to rotations in certain areas. We don't do ours that way, so this part is not necessary. You just go straight to Finalize.
disable clinical categories used during the student's clinical or field internship classes. Once you click the Finalize button, you will not be able to make changes to the scenario documentation. Students will not be able to sign up for opportunities unless the category is enabled when using this scenario portfolio process.
And again, we don't do it this way since Tammy signs them up. We should be able to bypass this, I'm thinking. That hasn't been addressed yet. So if the clinical coordinator is signing them up, and I will make myself a note on that because I hadn't thought about that before. Manage scenarios, clearing for clinicals, clinical coordinator. Make myself a note. I need to clarify that with Platinum because, and it won't affect you because it's not going to work for us to have to do this on every session. So I'll clarify that.
Once you finalize, the paperwork will then show in the completed tab on the Manage Student Documentation page. I hope you enjoyed our video on our new...
Now, once that's done, oh, and I don't want to hit escape here. Once that's done, then in the reports menu, there will be a section that is added now called scenarios. You've probably seen it before when you're checking reports, but I said it wasn't applicable to your students yet. And in that area, as each of the successful ones comes, it will add into that report. And just like in the upper lab data area, it has to be all green by the time they're done with testing. Now remember that for P1 and P2 skills, we have it divided where you start testing by assessing to see if there are any residual scenarios that they have left to do, either topics or team leaders or team members. To do that, you can look at the reports, but that's only going to show you the team leader or team member section. And you can look at you should look at their worksheets. So it's imperative that these people keep track of their stuff on their worksheets, and they bring these worksheets to every skills lab, including testing now. And now at testing will be when the final worksheet will be sent to me. I still like having it sent. And I know previously I said don't worry about sending me the worksheets if everything's in Platinum, but that has been very useful for me to have them. And also, due to the National Registry documentation standards, I'm standing on the fact that we're keeping our documentation lists running, showing what we've completed in this manner, and to use it to verify and assure honesty and integrity into what is entered into the lab report itself. So after each lab session, grab a copy of those, send them to me, but in testing sessions now, I will need the final completed version of those worksheets uploaded to me as well with the skill sheets every time. All right, I think that's all we have here for the documentation piece. You'll still be having to document the check sheets as normal, and they'll still be doing all their lab competencies as normal, but what you'll have to do is complete those, but the lab scenario documentation is done underneath that scenario place inside Platinum. And if it's a one-on-one session, you might decide, here's the scenarios I'm doing ahead of time. I've got to do all of these. You finish them, and then maybe at the end of the day, you need to go fill all these out. That's fine. Or do them as you go. But in a one-on-one session, they're pushed into your time frame so much that you may just have to kind of keep track and have them keep track on the worksheet and then go back and finish your documentation at the end of the day. When you have groups of students, it's probably going to be easier on you to set up the scenarios and include them so that you can have peer reviews, because if you have peer reviews, then you don't have to turn around and do a review as well on every scenario. You can have some peer reviews there to help fill the total number that feeds into the reports. Remember, I just need to make sure that when you get to the testing component, that you're the one who's doing the evaluation and testing. And you're the one who's filling out the scenario documentation. Because at least one adult, one geriatric, one pediatric, and one team member has to be done by you, at least. So if we do that in testing, I think that would solve that problem. And it may be a mixture of peer reviews and instructor reviews in between all of the opportunities that the candidate is going to, in between P1 days 1 and 2, P1 days 3 and 4, P1 testing, and then if there are challenges, they're getting credits from you. And I'm thinking on the challenge credits from you, you will have to go in and fill this stuff in for all of the ones for challenge, for all of them. Pretty sure that's the way that's going to have to be. So when you have a challenge student, however many scenarios it is, 12 or 15 or however many to meet all the topics and stuff, you're challenging, you're going in and saying that they did this. Right, that's why in challenge testing, your day needs to be longer. Because I would think that you need to make sure that not only that you're running them through the ones that you're doing summative testing on, but run them through as many of the other ones as you can. And that will give you a good feel for whether or not their performances are showing you that they're capable and have met the standards so that you can mark them off on the other ones. Because a challenge means they're demonstrating proficiency and they're demonstrating to us that they have enough cognitive and ability that's shown in not just their final exam that they're taking, but in the skills to make us comfortable that they have what they need from P1 to be able to go on into P2 and finish. All right? So this is a learning curve for all of us. Feedback. Get with me and tell me what your concerns are once you've done a couple of these. Let me know how you feel about it. Suggestions for Platinum, ways that you think it would make your job easier without being unreasonable. And let's see how we can make this work. The students who have enrolled as of August 1st, though, have to have the minimums that is on the reporting menu, regardless of how we do this. That is required by the National Registry, and I have to mark off that they've done these whenever I clear them for National Registry certification as a paramedic. I don't have to mark it as an EMT, but remember, AEMT, but remember those competencies are what feed into the paramedic competencies. So they have to be complete. Thank you. I appreciate you guys very, very much for all that you do. And thank you for helping me figure out a way to make all this work. I know this is going to be hard. And I know we talked about trying to make some of this happening before. We actually had students that were in it, but Platinum didn't have their system really ready. And I didn't have my sides of it ready in enough time to make this in a better way. And plus, I wasn't sure about how this was going to have to happen. And now that I see how Platinum is set up, we had to wait until we have actual students to make it work. So, guys, have a great day and let me know what you need. I will be sharing the faculty development roster with you. When you've completed all 3 of these, I need you to click on that roster and go in and complete the date and the comments and any of that stuff that's on there on that roster for you to show that you've completed. Let me know by email that you've completed it. You may want to watch these more than once. You may want to watch them through before more than one session. But that's what that's there for, and I need to document that you did it as well. Have a good day. Bye.